Are you looking to install an electronic pet containment system, or are you having some issues with your existing system? Well, if so, this video's for you. Hey folks, it's Adam with Outdoor Pet Solutions. I've been installing electronic pet containment systems for my customers here in the Middle Tennessee area for well over 20 years. And after 2 decades of working with these fence systems, I have discovered that they are made out of, well, electronics. And with most electronics, they do come with their fair share of complications if you don't quite know what you're doing when setting these systems up. So I decided to start this YouTube channel to help educate folks just like you on how to install these fence systems like a professional to help avoid these complications, all while saving you a ton of money by installing it yourself. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about interference. There are several different types of technology available when it comes to electronic pet containment. And regardless of which technology you're using, they are all susceptible to interference issues. Whether it's GPS fence systems, wireless fence systems, or in-ground wired fence systems, they're all susceptible to interference. And fully understanding how this interference occurs and how to avoid it will make your life a whole lot easier when installing these fence systems and while maintaining consistency of keeping your dog safely contained on your property. In this video, I'm going to address these technologies and talk about the different interference issues that can occur and how you can solve them. First, we'll talk about GPS dog fences. These GPS dog fences have really gained popularity and they're heavily advertised in these recent years. And that's due to the very fact that they're so easy to set up. If you purchase a GPS dog fencing system, you're going to receive a fence collar and an app on your phone. And through that app, you're going to set up stopping points for your dog in and around your property. Although these fence systems are very easy to set up, there are some limitations to them that you need to be aware of, including some interference issues. GPS dog fences use satellites up in space to track your dog's position within a set boundary. And physical obstructions as well as weather conditions can actually hinder that connectivity, losing the position of your dog. So if you're considering a GPS dog fencing system, you need to consider your property. I always suggest these types of fencing systems for customers that have large properties, well over 10 acres, because of the variance that can occur shifting that boundary on your dog. That way you can set the stopping points well within inside your property lines so that in the event if that satellite loses the position of your dog, it won't allow your dog to venture too far outside the boundary. So as I mentioned before, physical obstructions can hinder that connectivity with the satellite, keeping track of where your dog is. Because once the satellite loses the connection or thinks that the dog is outside that boundary, it's gonna start activating the collar, correcting your dog. So for an example, if you have a heavily treed lot, a lot of trees, large canopy trees, those trees can block that signal, therefore correcting your dog well within your property. Weather conditions can also interfere with the connectivity between the dog's collar and the satellites up in space. If it's a really heavy cloudy day, that thick overcast environment where the sun is having a hard time peeking through the clouds, then GPS systems also struggle to pinpoint exactly the position of your dog. Therefore, it may lose the connectivity and again start correcting your dog well within the property. And then of course, buildings, as I mentioned before, and that includes your home. A lot of these fence systems will come with a strong warning label that says, remember to remove the dog's collar each and every time they enter your home. Because once they come in and that roof cover is over them, the GPS may lose that signal again and start correcting the dog inside the house. This is a nightmare when it comes to training your dog on their new boundaries while keeping them happy to be in the yard as well as your home. So as far as these GPS fences are concerned, they're really designed for wide open spaces with unobstructed view of the sky. And then you have wireless dog fences. Wireless dog fences use a wireless pod that projects a radio frequency out and around your property. They are limited to about 100 feet or so from that unit. But because they're using a radio frequency, they are susceptible to interference with other radio frequencies that might be floating through the environment. An example of an interfering radio frequency that could hinder your dog fence could be a neighbor next door that hosts a conspiracy radio show and he's using a ham radio to broadcast. If that ham radio is on a similar frequency as your dog fence, it could activate the collar or deactivate the collar, allowing your dog to escape the yard. So when you set these wireless fence systems up, you need to go outside and thoroughly test the perimeter with the collar to ensure there are no premature activations or deactivations of the collar. And you should repeat that testing process every few months just to make sure there's not a new radio frequency nearby that's hindering your dog fence, because you don't want to find out the hard way when your dog is standing out in the middle of the street. And just like the GPS fence systems, line of sight is important with these wireless fence systems. So for example, if you have a sloped property, if your property slopes down away from your home, you're broadcasting that radio frequency straight out from probably the back door where that base station is. And as your dog ventures down the hill, the collar will lose the signal of the base station, therefore start activating and correcting your dog. This may be long before your dog ever reaches the back of your property. So if you're wanting to give your dog maximum playroom in your property, but your property happens to slope down, then you're going to run the risk of the dog not being able to venture that far out. And so the wireless fence systems may not be a good fit for you. Because again, the collar will start to react when it loses the signal from that wireless base station. So other obstructions may be large buildings, detached garages, and things like that on your property where that signal isn't able to penetrate all the way through, and therefore your dog could be getting corrected on the backside of those buildings, again, limiting the play area for your dog. And speaking of those buildings, if you have, say, a metal carport or other large metal structure, that metal cladding on that building can reflect that radio frequency. So for example, if you're wanting your dog to have access to these buildings and you're trying to broadcast that wireless frequency from your home all the way out around your yard, and that building happens to be in the middle of it, it may reflect that radio frequency, activating the collar within the building and around the building. Again, getting premature activations, confusing your dog and limiting the play area for them. So for wireless fence systems, if you have a small property that 100-foot projection can cover, that doesn't have large structures or metal structures, and your yard is nice and level, then that wireless fence system is a good fit for you. And lastly, we have the in-ground wired dog fencing systems. These physical wired systems are the original technology that came out in the mid-1970s and is still widely used today. We as professionals primarily install underground wired systems, and for a few good reasons, because the technology is less susceptible to interference issues like those two other technologies, the GPS and the wireless. And it's a lot more stable and consistent signal that runs along that wire, because the technology is kind of reversed from the other two. The other two technologies have to maintain constant contact with the collar, the signal, whereas the in-ground wired fence systems, the collar does not react or activate until it picks up the signal, and the signal is being projected off that physical wire in the ground, so we can really pinpoint exactly where we want the collar to trigger and where we don't. And for those reasons, it's less susceptible to interference issues from like physical obstructions, buildings, trees, things like that. However, it is susceptible to other types of interference issues that you need to be aware of. So when installing the physical wire around the perimeter of your property, you need to be mindful of underground utilities as well as overhead utilities. Now, when it comes to the overhead utilities, we're talking about high-powered electrical lines, the real big metal structures that are running the high voltage lines. If you happen to have a property that sits under those lines, you do not want to install the underground wired system in line with those high powered lines. You can run perpendicular under them and have less of an issue, but if you run right underneath, it could prematurely activate the collar. But Normal overhead residential lines, those are not an issue. It's just the high voltage power lines that you need to be mindful of, as well as underground utilities. So anytime you start digging in your yard to lay an underground dog fence wire, you need to contact 811 ahead of time. It's a free service in your area where they'll come out and mark those underground utilities. And based on the location of those utilities will determine how you can lay out that underground wired fence. If you just lay the wire all willy-nilly just the way you want, you can have some interference issues after you go through that installation. So the rule of thumb is, just like those overhead high voltage lines, you don't want to run right in line with an underground utility, such as your electrical line, which is painted red, or data lines, they're painted orange. Instead, cross over those lines perpendicular, and then stay about 3 to 4 feet away from them as you run down the side of your yard. This may change the layout of your fence just a little bit, but it will help prevent interference issues, as well as coupling. Now, what is coupling? Coupling is where electronic signals can couple to other physical wires in the ground. So if you lay right in line with those underground utilities, it could couple the signal to them. And this will transfer the radio frequency onto those lines, and they could be projecting into your home. So your collar for the dog may activate in certain spots inside your home. So again, crossing those lines perpendicular and not parallel will ensure you prevent that coupling from occurring. Another consideration to help prevent coupling is do not mount your base station, the transmitter that you connect those underground wires to, within 3 feet of an electrical panel, your fuse box. If you do, you can run the risk of that radio frequency coupling over to the fuse box, and it'll run down those electrical lines within your home and again activate the collar inside your house. And then another interference issue that can occur is when you have a neighbor using an electronic dog fence on the same frequency or similar frequency. If you do, your collars, both your neighbors and yours along that one side, can deactivate, because when the signals come in too close to one another, they can kill the signal. So you have a couple of options when it comes to a neighboring dog fence on the same frequency. You can install your dog fence wire 4 to 5 feet in away from your neighbor's wire, and then you can adjust your field width accordingly to help prevent that interference overlap. The downfall to that option is that you're going to lose some play area for your dog, because when you move that wire in, you're going to be pushing your dog further into your yard. So your second option, which is a preferred one, is to purchase a commercial grade dog fencing system that allows you to adjust the frequency. Most of these DIY dog fence systems that you can purchase online, such as Amazon, eBay, and down at your local pet store, they all operate on a fixed radio frequency that you cannot adjust. So after you purchase the fence system and go through setting it all up, you could find yourself in a situation where there's interference due to any one of these examples I've reviewed. And you'll be forced to make some physical adjustments to your fence, whether that's moving the wire or relocating the transmitter, which can be a real pain. So being able to just adjust the frequency on the fly after you've set everything up to eliminate those interference issues is a godsend. You don't have to change the layout of your fence system, and you can get right on to training your dog to stay on your property. And so to make the installation process as smooth as possible and the enjoyment of keeping your dog contained on your property, I came out with the Freedom OPS Elite Dog Fencing Kit. It's a commercial grade dog fencing system that is proudly designed and assembled right here in the USA. It includes all the same commercial grade equipment that I use in my professional installations. And best of all, you have adjustability when it comes to those frequencies. If you happen to discover that you have some interference issues after you install the fence system, you can adjust the frequency easily right at the transmitter. So that is one of the differences between a commercial grade system and one of those consumer grade systems you can buy online. If you're in the market for an electronic pet containment system and you're looking for the absolute best, be sure to click the link down in the description to check out the Freedom OPS Elite. All the pricing you see online does include ground shipping direct to you via UPS. I hope this video was helpful to you in understanding the various causes of interference that can affect your dog fencing system and how you can avoid them. And as always, thanks for watching. Goodbye.